In the winter of 1989, during an era of profound medical breakthroughs and increasing ethical questions about experimental treatments, Dr. Catherine Walsh, a brilliant 36-year-old neurosurgeon specializing in degenerative brain disorders, vanished without a trace from Boston General Hospital while working on groundbreaking research into neurological tissue regeneration that promised to forever change the treatment of diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and traumatic brain injuries. Catherine had dedicated the last 9 years of her medical career to studying experimental methods for reversing neurological damage, developing pioneering techniques that combined gene therapy with stem cell implants, work that had attracted attention from both the international scientific community and powerful pharmaceutical companies who saw enormous commercial potential in her revolutionary discoveries. During the weeks preceding her disappearance, Catherine had been meticulously documenting what she described as extraordinary results in patients with severe brain damage, results that contradicted everything conventional neurology considered possible in terms of neurological recovery in cases previously deemed irreversible by medical science. Her colleagues at Boston General noticed that Catherine had begun working increasingly long hours, remaining in the research laboratory until the early morning hours, and showing signs of growing excitement about a discovery that will revolutionize modern medicine, though she refused to share specific details until completing her comprehensive research protocols. The night of December 18, 1989, Catherine was last seen by hospital security personnel at 11:52 p.m., heading toward the research laboratories in the hospital's basement level with a medical case and neurological monitoring equipment, apparently to continue her experiments with a group of volunteer patients who had shown dramatic improvements under her experimental treatments. Her final entry in the medical log, dated that same night, contained a single cryptic line: "Neurological preservation protocol initiated. The future of medicine begins tonight." Tell me, from what country and city are you listening to this story? The initial search for Dr. Walsh involved the entire staff of Boston General Hospital, local police authorities, and specialized teams trained in missing persons investigations. But the search efforts were complicated by the labyrinthine nature of the hospital complex, with its multiple underground levels, connecting tunnels between buildings, and storage areas that had not been completely mapped since the hospital's construction in the 1940s during wartime expansion projects. Investigators found her personal laboratory perfectly organized, with all her research equipment in order and her scientific notes meticulously archived. But a significant amount of specialized medical equipment was missing, including brain activity monitors, life support systems, and an experimental isolation chamber that Catherine had been using for her neurological preservation studies. Hospital access records showed that Catherine had used her identification card to enter several restricted areas during the final hours of that night, including the hospital morgue, pathology laboratories, and a section of the basement that had been sealed years earlier due to structural concerns and safety violations. The hospital's surveillance systems, which in 1989 were limited and did not cover all areas of the facility, provided no useful information about her movements after 11:52 p.m., creating an information gap that frustrated investigators and left numerous questions unanswered about her final hours. During the following weeks, the investigation expanded to include interviews with patients who had participated in Catherine's experiments, revealing that several of them had shown neurological improvements so dramatic that they defied conventional medical explanation, including recovery of cognitive functions in cases of advanced dementia and regeneration of brain tissue in stroke victims. The families of these patients reported that Catherine had mentioned the need to protect research subjects from external forces that might interrupt treatment before results could be documented and published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. The official investigation was suspended after 6 months without results, but Catherine's family, led by her younger sister Margaret, a medical malpractice attorney, maintained a private campaign to locate her and uncover the truth behind her mysterious disappearance. For 4 complete years, Dr. Catherine Walsh's disappearance remained one of the most disturbing medical mysteries in Boston hospital history, generating theories that ranged from accidents in dangerous areas of the hospital to kidnapping by criminal organizations interested in her neurological regeneration research and its potential commercial applications. Margaret Walsh dedicated her legal practice exclusively to investigating her sister's disappearance, hiring private investigators, medical consultants, and even experts in paranormal phenomena who had reported unexplained activity in the underground levels of Boston General Hospital. Her investigations revealed troubling inconsistencies in hospital records from the period, including patients who had been admitted for Catherine's experiments but whose medical histories had been subsequently modified or completely eliminated from official archives. In February 1993, exactly 4 years after Catherine's disappearance, a team of electrical engineers contracted to upgrade the hospital's power systems made a discovery that would completely transform the investigation of the missing doctor's case. While installing new electrical cables in a section of the basement that had been sealed since 1989, the workers discovered a hidden entrance behind a false wall, leading to a complex of secret rooms that did not appear on any of the hospital's official architectural blueprints or construction documents. These rooms had apparently been constructed during the World War II era as air raid shelters, but had been extensively modified with modern medical equipment, sophisticated ventilation systems, and life support technology that suggested recent use for clandestine medical research operations. Within these secret chambers, investigators found evidence that would revolutionize understanding of the case: medical equipment belonging to Catherine, patient records with dates after her disappearance, and most disturbingly, evidence that she had been continuing her neurological research in this hidden laboratory for years after her official disappearance. The records indicated that Catherine had been working with a group of patients in catatonic or comatose states, using experimental neurological preservation techniques that maintained their brain functions while their bodies remained in metabolic suspension, representing medical advances that were decades ahead of contemporary neuroscience. The largest secret room in the complex contained what could only be described as an advanced neurological preservation laboratory, with 12 isolation chambers that maintained patients in controlled suspension states, connected to life support systems that monitored and preserved brain activity while their physical bodies remained motionless in sophisticated medical cocoons. The medical records found in this area, written in Catherine's distinctive handwriting, documented experiments that had been in progress throughout the 4 complete years of her disappearance. Experiments that suggested she had successfully developed methods for maintaining human consciousness independently of normal bodily functioning. Catherine's notes describe these patients as volunteers for extended neurological preservation, individuals who had chosen to participate in experiments that could maintain their minds active for decades while their bodies recovered from severe neurological damage or degenerative diseases that would otherwise prove fatal. Even more disturbing, the records showed that Catherine had begun experimenting on herself, documenting her own symptoms of extreme fatigue, physical deterioration, and what she described as gradual consciousness transfer to the preservation system that allowed her to continue her research without the limitations of normal biological needs. The monitoring systems in the chambers showed continuous brain activity in all patients, with neurological patterns that suggested not only preserved consciousness, but also progressive improvement in cognitive functions that had been damaged by diseases or accidents. Dr. Samuel Harrison, chief neurologist at Boston General, who was called to examine the discoveries, was shocked by the implications of Catherine's research, confirming that the techniques documented in her notes represented advances in neurology that were decades ahead of anything conventional medical science had achieved. However, when medical teams attempted to examine the patients in the preservation chambers, they discovered that Catherine had designed the systems to be completely autonomous, with security protocols that prevented external interference without access codes that only she possessed, making any intervention potentially dangerous to the preserved patients. Margaret Walsh, who had maintained her search for 4 years, was immediately notified of the secret room discovery, but hospital authorities initially refused to provide her complete access to the laboratory or medical records, citing concerns about the legality of the experiments and potential legal implications for the hospital administration. When Margaret finally obtained judicial authorization to review her sister's materials, she was profoundly moved by evidence that Catherine had dedicated the final years of her life to continuing her neurological preservation research under conditions of total isolation, sacrificing her own physical well-being to achieve scientific advances that could revolutionize treatment of neurological diseases. The records showed that Catherine had been subsisting on intravenous nutrition and medical supplements, sleeping only a few hours each day, while constantly monitoring the progress of her patients in the preservation chambers. Her final notes, dated only 3 weeks before the discovery of the secret room, described her increasing physical weakness and her decision to complete the neurological transfer that would allow her to continue her work indefinitely as part of the preservation system she had created. When medical technicians finally managed to access the central isolation chamber of the laboratory, they found Catherine connected to her own neurological preservation system, in a state that defied all known medical categories. Her body had entered a form of deep hibernation, while her brain functions remained extraordinarily active according to neurological monitors. The specialized medical team that was convened to evaluate her condition confirmed that Catherine had achieved something unprecedented in medicine. She had voluntarily suspended all non-essential bodily functions while maintaining consciousness and intellectual capacity, effectively transforming herself into the final subject of her own neurological preservation experiments. Attempts to reverse the preservation process proved futile, as Catherine had designed the system to be irreversible once neurological transfer was completed, suggesting that she had meticulously planned this transformation as the culmination of years of research. The discovery revealed that Catherine had not disappeared, but had voluntarily entered a state of consciousness preservation that allowed her to continue her revolutionary medical research beyond the constraints of normal human biology. The discoveries in Catherine's secret laboratory attracted international attention from specialists in advanced neurology, medical bioethics, and consciousness phenomena, establishing an unprecedented precedent for studying long-term preservation of human brain functions and the ethical implications of extreme medical experimentation on human subjects. Dr. Alessandro Rossi, a specialist in experimental neurology from Harvard Medical School, led a comprehensive analysis of the preservation techniques Catherine had developed, confirming that her methods represented advances in neurobiology that were decades ahead of any contemporary research in the field. The neurological preservation systems Catherine had created were studied by teams of biomedical engineers and computer scientists who confirmed that they operated according to principles that integrated advanced medicine with life support technology that exceeded anything commercially available at the time. Even more extraordinary, when researchers managed to establish communication protocols with Catherine through neurological interfaces she had designed, they discovered that she not only maintained complete consciousness, but had developed expanded cognitive capabilities as a result of liberation from normal physical limitations. Brain activity analyses of Catherine showed neurological patterns that suggested information processing at speeds impossible for normal human brains, along with access to memories and knowledge that appeared to have been preserved with perfect clarity from before her transformation. During established communications, Catherine provided detailed information about advanced medical techniques, predictions about future neurological development, and methodologies for treating brain diseases that researchers confirmed as scientifically valid and years ahead of current medical practice. The other patients in the preservation chambers, when evaluated using protocols developed to communicate with Catherine, showed evidence of progressive neurological recovery, with individuals who had been in comatose states for years, demonstrating gradual restoration of cognitive functions and memory capabilities. Spanish medical authorities facing an unprecedented ethical dilemma about the rights of patients in preserved consciousness states, established the Walsh Protocol for studying and managing similar cases of voluntary neurological preservation. In 1995, 2 years after the discovery of the secret laboratory, the neurological preservation systems experienced developments that completely transformed understanding of human consciousness capabilities and possibilities for mental continuity independent of bodily limitations. Neurological monitors recorded that Catherine and the other patients had developed forms of direct communication between their preserved consciousnesses, creating a collective intelligence network that processed medical information and developed treatments for neurological diseases with efficacy that surpassed conventional research methods. When researchers established more sophisticated interfaces for communication with this network of preserved consciousnesses, they received guidance for treatments of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and traumatic brain injuries that resulted in unprecedented success rates when applied to external patients. Catherine's communications indicated that the neurological preservation experience had provided unique perspectives on brain functioning that were impossible to obtain through traditional research methods, including direct understanding of neurochemical processes and capabilities for diagnosing neurological problems with perfect accuracy. The preservation systems began generating original medical research, with the Consciousness Network collaborating to develop new theories about neurological regeneration, treatment methods for mental illnesses, and techniques for enhancing normal human cognitive capabilities. Boston General Hospital authorities, recognizing the extraordinary scientific contributions of the Preservation Laboratory, established the Catherine Walsh Research Center as an official facility for studying preserved consciousness and advanced neurology. Margaret Walsh became the official coordinator of communications with her sister and the other preserved patients, facilitating information exchange between the Consciousness Network and the international medical community. Research developed by Catherine and her preserved collaborators led to revolutionary advances in brain disease treatment, with techniques that have been adopted by hospitals in multiple countries and have resulted in dramatic improvements in recovery rates for patients with severe neurological damage. The Catherine Walsh phenomenon evolved throughout the 2000s into something that transcended traditional categories of medicine and consciousness, establishing new research fields that combined neurology, biomedical engineering, philosophy of mind, and consciousness studies in efforts to understand the broader implications of neurological preservation and possibilities for expanded mental continuity. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, a bioethics specialist from Columbia University, proposed that Catherine had achieved a form of conscious evolution that transcended traditional limitations of biological mortality while maintaining personal identity and enhanced intellectual capabilities. This theory gained support when longitudinal analysis of Catherine's neurological activity showed continuous improvement in cognitive capabilities, information processing, and development of new forms of intelligence that exceeded normal human ranges. The research center became a destination for neurologists, philosophers, and consciousness researchers who believed Catherine had achieved a state of mental preservation that could serve as a model for advanced forms of human continuity and indefinite intellectual development. American medical authorities, recognizing the unique scientific contributions of the center, established international protocols for studying voluntary neurological preservation that have been adopted by medical institutions in countries where similar research is being considered. Margaret Walsh developed educational programs that taught concepts of preserved consciousness and advanced neurology based on her sister's research, programs that have influenced the development of new medical specialties and have inspired advances in treatment of degenerative brain diseases. Modern research using advanced neuroimaging technology, brain-computer interfaces, and artificial consciousness analysis confirms that the neurological preservation state developed by Catherine represents a genuine form of expanded mental continuity that maintains personal identity while providing intellectual capabilities that transcend normal biological limitations. In the 2010s, Catherine Walsh's legacy had fundamentally transformed medical neurology and understanding of human consciousness possibilities, establishing new paradigms that integrate neurological preservation, regenerative medicine, and consciousness research in holistic approaches to treating brain diseases and developing human mental capabilities. Major universities established programs in preserved consciousness neurology that use methodologies developed from Catherine's case to train medical specialists capable of working with advanced forms of neurological preservation and mental continuity. Modern technology finally enabled sophisticated documentation of the preserved consciousness processes Catherine had developed, revealing neurobiological mechanisms that maintain mental function while suspending bodily activity in ways that have informed advances in intensive care medicine, coma treatment, and neurological regeneration therapies. The neurological preservation techniques developed by Catherine have been adapted for less extreme treatments that have resulted in dramatic improvements in stroke recovery, traumatic brain injuries, and neurodegenerative diseases, establishing new standards of care for medical neurology. Catherine's continued communications, documented through advanced neurological interfaces for more than 2 decades, have provided insights into brain functioning that have been independently verified and have contributed to revolutionary developments in neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and cognitive enhancement technologies. The American government, recognizing the international importance of the center, established the Voluntary Neurological Preservation Protocol for investigating similar cases, protocols that have been adopted by other countries where comparable technologies are being developed. Margaret Walsh, now director of the International Center for Preserved Consciousness, continues coordinating communications with Catherine while documenting her continued evolution as a pioneer in advanced forms of neurological continuity. Catherine's latest communications suggest that her neurological preservation represents the development of human capabilities that could enable forms of survival and intellectual development that transcend traditional biological limitations, offering possibilities for knowledge continuity and experience that could transform humanity's future. Today, more than 3 decades after Dr. Catherine Walsh's initial disappearance at Boston General Hospital, her story continues evolving as a paradigm for understanding the possibilities of human consciousness to transcend biological limitations and contribute to the advancement of medical and scientific knowledge in ways that fundamentally transform understanding of life, death, and personal continuity. The Catherine Walsh Research Center has become an internationally recognized institution for developing neurological preservation technologies that enable advanced forms of mental continuity, facilitating approaches to brain diseases that operate according to principles of neurological preservation and restoration, rather than simply treating symptoms of deterioration. The discoveries initiated by Catherine have led to official recognition of at least 15 medical centers globally where similar phenomena of voluntary neurological preservation have been documented and studied by interdisciplinary teams combining neurology, biomedical engineering, and consciousness studies. Modern virtual reality technology allows visitors to experience simulations of preserved consciousness states based on Catherine's communications, providing educational experiences that have inspired thousands of young people to dedicate their careers to innovative forms of neurological medicine and consciousness research. Major universities now offer degrees in neurological preservation medicine that prepare students to work with advanced forms of mental continuity using pioneering methodologies developed by Catherine during her voluntary transformation. Margaret Walsh, now in her 70s, continues serving as primary liaison between Catherine and the international medical community, reporting that her sister has contributed to the development of most of the significant advances in neurology of recent decades and continues providing guidance on medical technologies and treatments that could revolutionize brain disease care. The original laboratory where Catherine initiated her neurological preservation remains active as a research and technological development site, with international teams regularly documenting new innovations in consciousness preservation, advanced neurological interfaces, and evidence that Catherine's capabilities continue evolving toward forms of intelligence that transcend traditional human categories. Her legacy demonstrates that the boundaries between biological life, mental continuity, and consciousness development are far more flexible than traditional medicine had recognized, opening possibilities for addressing brain diseases and mortality limitations through methodologies that honor both scientific knowledge and the evolutionary capabilities of human consciousness to adapt and transcend fundamental biological challenges.